okay, what the heck did I get myself in? You know, why am I here? What's going on? This year, the first day of session is, okay, bring it on. I'm ready to get going. So I think that's why it seems so different. The atmosphere is different. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows who they can work with. I think we're going to see a ton of bills. We've already seen a lot of bills, probably more than we have. I know more than we have in previous years. And I've heard some estimates, and I hope they are wrong, because if they are, we're going to have to spend a lot of time getting things done. So the non-meandering bill came out of the Senate committee yesterday, and obviously there's a lot of questions as to what might happen with that, so we'll see where that goes from there. And that's probably the biggest thing, at least that's on my radar, that's happened so far. There's some other things going on, but that's the biggest thing right now.
Good morning, Representative Kent Peterson, Assistant Majority Leader, House of Representatives. As the leader mentioned, you know, kind of a couple things this year with the governor being in his last year of his term, no huge initiative coming off of a summer study that was led by the executive branch. You know, it kind of leaves things open to whatever. And so I think we're going to see that. There's going to be legislation coming in lots of different areas. But ultimately, it's going to come down to us balancing our budget, taking care of the things that need to be taken care of, hopeful that the revenue numbers are going to start to increase. And we'll see that here as we get into the next month. And as we set our revenue projections in the middle of February. And then the hard decisions become on the table at that point. And until that point, you know, we're speculating on a lot of things. So obviously, budget for me is always number one, and there'll be a lot of things that come beyond that.
Over in the Senate, we're starting to see quite a few bills circulating, people running around for signatures. Something that I've seen that I've not seen in the past this year are the number of constitutional amendments that are floating around out there, which is really quite interesting. I think I've seen at least probably six to eight different constitutional amendments that are floating around out there, which is somewhat a little bit unnerving, I guess, that we're going to have that many amendments to our Constitution. Plus the ones that are already been filed for the ballot. We could have a very, very busy ballot come the fall of 18. Other things that are floating around in the Senate, the leader spoke about the meandered water bill coming out on the Senate Ag yesterday, which it has. I know there's another group over in the Senate that wants to explore other ideas, and they are working on getting that bill formulated. I haven't seen it yet. I've seen their ideas. So I know we are going to have a discussion on meandered waters, which good, bad, and other. I personally want to see the existing sunset clause just extended for a couple years. I think the process is working. I think we need a little more data before we start tinkering with the system. So that's kind of the short and skinny of what's going on in the Senate. I talked about meandered waters and
Good morning, Blake Curd, District 12. I have the privilege of serving as South Dakota's Senate Majority Leader. It's great to see you all back in Pierre again today, especially when it's going to be 50 degrees. So I'm announcing formally we're going to have session floor outside this afternoon to celebrate the arrival of spring. In all seriousness, it's been a busy 2 weeks already. The Legislative Research Council's been very busily working, putting together lots of different commemorations, resolutions, and a whole host of bills that we'll get to address later on in the session. You've probably heard that this morning already to some degree. Looks like we're going to be a little busier than we were last year and have a little bit more work to do in our committees and also on our respective chamber floors. So I'm sure you've heard from these gentlemen kind of the direction that the legislature is headed in at the current moment, and look forward to any of the questions that you may have this morning.
Senator Maher, you were talking about some other different directions in regards to non-meandered waters being talked about in the Senate. Could you give us a sense of what some of those are aside from extending the sunset?
I think, if you'd like me to kind of substitute for Senator Maher, we've heard of several different potential modifications to the regulation as it currently exists. We don't think that those are in final form, nor has the final bill been drafted and introduced on that yet. So at this point, we're probably not prepared to discuss them. We'd like to continue the discussions with our House leadership colleagues and see if there might be an opportunity to kind of make sure that that bill's in a format that some folks would be interested in discussing at some level before we get too far out in front of it. We don't want to get over the tip of our skis too far on it yet. We might find that some of the changes are not that dramatic and are palatable and could be considered relatively without a lot of angst. And so until we get to that point, I think we're going to reserve comment on it.
Senator Maher, you had mentioned several constitutional amendments. Can you talk about some of the topics on those?
Oh, goodness. Let's see. What have I seen so far? One is dealing with gaming in Yankton. What was the one? I'm trying to think of a couple other ones. There's other one. I can't think of them right offhand, but I know I've seen at least 6 of them out there. But I think the Yankton delegation is. What's that? What's that? Oh.
I don't know if they're looking to the
I don't know if it is the Yankton people or if they're looking at a delegation of Eastern South Dakota folks or, trying to.
I was a lobbyist that came, but like one of our lobbyists upstairs that came through with the paperwork, so I didn't know who was priming it at the time.
Yeah, I don't know if that's all been determined. So, anyway.
There's been some early conversation about reform to the initiated measure process. A few bills have been passed or not passed. You've all been involved with those. Any thoughts on what changes you would support and which you would oppose as that conversation carries on?
Sure. I served on the initiative measure and task force, initiative measure reform task force this summer, and I think we had 9 or 10 bills that came from those discussions. I'm prime sponsor of a few of them. We had a discussion this week pertaining to the executive director of the LRC gives comments to people that bring initiated ballot measures, and just setting some time frame parameters. Currently, they have 15 days after submission to give comment, and we wanted to put some parameters on. And our busiest time of year is their busiest time of the year, so what we proposed this summer and what passed the House earlier this week was any ballot measure submitted after the 1st of December will not have to be required to receive comment until 15 work days post adjournment sine die. Obviously, if their time allows, they can still, the director LRC can still provide comment. So that's one of the changes. I'm also prime sponsor of House Bill 1005, which is a bill to help clarify the recitation for ballot measures for constitutional amendments and referred laws, and that's currently in process. As passed through State Affairs. We're working on a few technicalities that we're kind of getting everything in tune with, but the thing we were charged with this summer was to find a way to bring clarity where possible in this process. Some are very small changes, and some could be considered more dramatic. But I think what the intent is, as these go through the ballot, my constituents ask me to say, how can we make this more clear? And that's I'm trying to keep them in mind as we're making any possible changes to this, so that they have the best information they can have to go make an informed decision when they step into the ballot box. So.
Sure. The most notable, I think, is the bill that passed through the Senate yesterday, and that's clarifying a fiscal note for initiated measures. And there was one initiated measure that got missed kind of in the fiscal note process, and so at least in the Senate yesterday, we thought that the law ought to apply to that particular initiated measure for a fiscal impact statement as well, and I'm sure that'll find its way through a favorable House committee, and we look forward to that being implemented so that the initiated measures that folks see on the ballot in November are all treated in a uniform fashion.
The prime sponsor of that in the House, I think Senator Ernie Otten was the prime of that in the Senate. So.
Here in a half hour, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them up in State Affairs. Senate Bills 7, 8, 10, 11, and 12. So we'll see how they all turnout here in a few short minutes.
There's been some concern I've heard about the language surrounding in 1005 about referred laws, and some people are saying that it's a yes means no vote and no means yes. Is that part of the discussion about clarifying?
Yes.
In what way?
We're, like I said earlier, the intent of what we did this summer was to try to bring clarity. And, we're trying to, in my opinion, how it currently stands right now is it's very confusing. And that was the thought of the committee as well this summer. So the language we came with through the summer was vote yes to reject, vote no to leave as the legislature had it, and which is it's a fundamental change as to what it is right now. So we thought that was more clear when how it relates to that, but we're discussing that still.
I believe at least two of you also have been appointed to Senator Greenfield's work group dealing with the rules on sexual harassment. Can you speak to the work that you might be doing on that and what you've done so far, if anything?
Yeah, I'll address that. It's just being put together. We haven't really talked about anything at all yet. When we're going to meet, what we're going to discuss. I guess I would assume at this point, we'll take a look at something that the surrounding states have. Just get an idea where they're at. The one thing, the workshop with NCSL, they said that we have a pretty good set in place right now. And now, whether they say that to everybody or not, we didn't get to ask that question, so that part I'm not sure about. But we've used them last year. They worked, and we feel confident that that things are, that we're headed on the right direction. Not that they can't be changed if we see something necessary. I think the big thing is we've got a lot of different people in place where people can go talk to if there's a problem, so that whoever they feel comfortable with, they can go and address an issue with them. And I think that's an important part of having everything in place.
Dana, I think it's unfortunate that you narrowed the scope of that particular group of folks. It's really the code of conduct, and it's not so narrow as you've tried to define it as sexual harassment. There are many other topics that we could address. I think it will start with us looking at the current rules that we have in the legislature and then seeing which, if any, need to be modified. We're certainly open to consideration. We have not yet set a date for our first committee hearing, nor have we had informal discussions about it, but those will be forthcoming. And as you know, the committee process will be open and people can attend if they so choose and provide input and feedback to us. But I think we'll start kind of where our framework is and then see what we need to build and fill in based on what we've already got.
Just a follow-up question. I think Senator Sutton had proposed changes to sexual harassment rules that kind of got the process kicked off. At what point did the concept change to look at the code of conduct? Because that's not how it was described to us previously.
I don't know, James, that it's ever changed as far as I'm concerned with it. Certainly Senator Sutton introduced a topic of conversation that I think had some areas in it that had potential flaws, and he was willing to discuss those. So I think that'll be certainly one of the things that we entertain when we sit down to discuss it together. But I think the topic is broader than just trying to narrowly define it. There are many ways that we interact with each other, and I think we all have expectations about those interactions, and we want to make sure that we behave in a statesman-like fashion with decorum and respect the legislature and other legislators. And so that's part and parcel of what I believe that this group of individuals will be discussing.
If I could comment on that, well, I would agree with what the leader said, that it's far more broad than just sexual harassment. And one thing that that the gentleman with NCSL asked about, okay, what are 3 things you'd like to see the legislature remembered for, or if there's anything that I would feel was important when them, and I would say, number 1, morals, what they do. Number 2, integrity, and number 3, just plain common sense. Common sense would go a long way, and that's not so common anymore. And that would just tell you if things are right or wrong, and you need to go with that. So those are 3 things that I think are very important.
Can you all talk about whether your caucuses have discussed, I think, 1073, the campus free speech bill, and if there's any opinions that you have on that legislation?
We have not discussed that. As things come up, we'll definitely start that discussion. We know what's out there, and it should be interesting to see what happens with that.
We haven't had any of those discussions in the Senate. Of course, it's over in the House, and right now we're concentrated on Senate bills and appropriation matters.
My stock question, could you give me a look ahead for the next week, what we'll be talking about at next week's press conference? What do you see as big developments in the few days ahead? And Democrats had suggested that we could see as many as 600 bills this session. What do you think of that number?
I think that 600 is everything that's in the drafting process, including commemorations and resolutions. So I don't believe that there are 600 bill drafts that exist. Many times people will draft bills and then they never get introduced. So certainly the volume is higher than last year. So I think we will, as I stated earlier, be working a little harder in our committees and in our respective chambers. But I doubt that we will entertain 600 individual votes or in the aggregate resolutions, commemorations, and bills throughout the legislative session. But it will certainly be several hundred and probably more than last year. As far as looking ahead next week, I'm sure we'll be talking about the changes to the initiated measure process that are in Senate State Affairs today. Those will more likely than not find their way to the Senate floor next week. I think we will probably again be discussing the non-meandered waters issue at some level. And I think we will probably start to discuss a little bit more the proposed changes to our alcohol and beverage laws that are being circulated now. I believe one of those bills regarding microbreweries and craft brewers will probably be introduced today, if not Monday. So I think that'll be a topic for us. Apparently, when I said to Dana that I hadn't been contacted by anyone in Sioux Falls saying this was a problem, that must have been a stimulus, because now I've been contacted a lot by brewers from Sioux Falls that would like to discuss it. So I think you should be careful about what you ask for, because you may get a result. So, but they've been great conversations, and we have a burgeoning craft brew industry in South Dakota, as many of you know, and if we can be supportive of that industry in a way that works for South Dakota, I'm very interested in bringing that to some kind of resolution that works for everybody involved.
Well, I would agree with everything that the leader has said, and then I would just add on our side, we started talking about HGR, Joint Resolution 1001 regarding legislative pay. What the caucus feels about that. Do we want to go forward? Really, there's 3 options. We go forward with that as written, we change it and put it in statute, or we don't go on with it at all. And it's interesting when we see where that's at. We just have begun discussions and lots of different opinions out there, so that could be an interesting one. Also, Precision Ag Lab in Brookings is, for Representative Peterson and myself, very high on the radar. We've started discussions with that, and hopefully that's something we can get done. I think that is vital for the state of South Dakota to get that in place. It will really make our farmers and ranchers more competitive in the long run when we're able to do that. Precision ag is the future of agriculture. There's already a lot of stuff out there, but I think, quite frankly, we're at the tip of the iceberg of where this can go. I mean, we're at a level here, and I know some stuff at a level here, but there's another level up here where nobody's even thought about yet. And we've got some great people contributing to it. Raven came in with a bunch of money, and I think we're going to see some other donations like that. So we're excited about it, and we're ready to move forward.
I'd agree with the Leader Qualm's comments there. Also, I think we'll more than likely have some resolution on House Bill 1005, recitation bill by next week. I think it's been deferred to Wednesday. Hopefully we're working on some things on the side to address some possible changes, and so I would imagine we'll be able to talk a little more clearly about that next week. And just, as we're getting into the process, getting through some of the pre-filed bills, a lot of the agency type bills, and getting into more of the member bills now, and so it'll be, the diversity of the bills is as wide as it's been. So.
Senator Bolin has said he filed a bill that would increase legislator pay, but also shrink the number of legislative districts or representatives and senators from each district with a cost neutralizing effect. Have you seen that measure? Do you have any thoughts on it at this time? No?
Yeah, the same. I just heard that last night, first time, and so.
I think the bill was to shrink it to one legislative district and put all the pay in that one person's pocket. I think that was.
Maybe that's what it was.
I have
I
not
think
seen
they
it.
call it a dictatorship.
Oh, is that? Maybe
not a
that's what
good
he's
idea.
proposing. I'm not sure. No, I haven't seen
All
it.
I know is that if he shrinks legislative districts, I just as well have all of western South Dakota.